Hi friends, welcome to today's video. Thanks for joining me. Today we're going to do a full face of new makeup. I've got some things sitting here on my vanity that I have been wanting to try. Some things that I've had for about a month that I haven't had a chance to sit down and actually put on, play around with, give you my thoughts on. Some new things that I just got in the mail that I've had my eye on for some time. So we're just going to sit down, we're going to play with makeup, have a good time. So if that sounds good, take out all of your makeup goodies and let's get ready together. There isn't a new primer launch from the drugstore, so I'm going to pull one that's fairly new and recent that I truly have loved and used so much. It's the Milani Conceal and Perfect Blur Out Primer. It comes in a lavender packaging like this. I have used such a big chunk out of this product. It is a good primer. I've already done a review on it, but in a nutshell, it smooths, it blurs, it makes the skin really soft. It goes over nicely over the textured areas of my skin. Works beautifully under every foundation, whether it's drugstore, high-end, and like I said, it's one of those primers that I've used consistently over and over again since I bought it, since I reviewed it, and I like it. I feel like it's one of my go-to products now from the drugstore, and it's incredibly affordable, easy to find, all good things. I hope that this primer is going to work well with this new foundation that I'm trying for the first time with you on camera. That primer is something that is very reliable for me with every foundation that I own. It's played really nicely, very beautifully underneath. The foundation we're going to use today is from About Face. It's the Performer foundation. I bought this quite a bit ago, probably over a month ago, and I have yet to try it. The shade that I ordered is L2 Neutral. I'm not quite sure if this is the right shade. I sometimes get it wrong with the tone. Sometimes the undertone can look a little off online, but we're just going to give it a go. I have my damp beauty sponge, which is from Real Techniques, damp and ready to go. So we're just going to go over this primer with the Performer foundation. I'm going to give it a good shake. It's been sitting on my vanity for some time, so I want to make sure everything is really nicely incorporated inside. I have high hopes for this because the ratings and reviews online at the Ulta site seem really nice and positive reviews, so I am very hopeful. If you have not seen this foundation, it has a massive doe foot applicator. Some people love that. Some people, like myself, would prefer a pump, just because you can control the amount, so that's kind of automatically one of those things that I'm not too big of a fan of. I also don't like to swipe it directly onto my skin for hygienic reasons. That's just me personally. If you swipe all over your face and go back in, you do you. But I'm going to be working off of a makeup palette. Here's a couple little dabs of that color. I think it's going to be fine. This is the L2, by the way. I think I already mentioned that. And on my makeup palette, I did 3 swipes of that doe foot applicator. I don't know if that's going to be enough, but that's what we're starting off with. And I'm going to do one side of my face so we can kind of compare and see what the coverage is like. Actually, that color seems to be pretty good match. It does look a lot darker in the actual bottle, which is plastic, by the way, but it actually looks like a good match for me. So yay, I'm happy about that. It's always a good thing when you get it right, especially when you buy online. So this is the side that we applied the Performer foundation. This side is just the primer side. I would say that the finish is very skin-like, and I can see still that my skin looks like skin, but a little bit more with coverage. I would say the coverage is probably a good medium. Again, with the sponge, it tends to absorb excess product. So in order for me to get more coverage, I think I would have to switch to a brush and maybe build this up a little bit with like a more dense brush. I personally like the sponge method for my foundation anyways, and I do like the way this color looks, and I like the finish of it. It's not overly radiant or dewy, but it's also not matte. So I guess I could go back to that skin-like sort of finish and quality about it that I noticed immediately. That's what I would say is the finish of it, and it blended out really nicely over the primer, which I'm excited about. So this is, again, the side with the foundation, and then this is the side with just primer. The 3 swipes that I did from the doe foot applicator was enough for this half face, so I would probably need to do the same amount, 3 more swipes here. And I know the sound of 3 swipes of the doe foot seems like a lot of product potentially, but when you do the first swipe, it's not really that much. It's a very small amount that comes off, so hopefully that kind of helps clarify that, because I know 3 swipes, which would be 6 total for the face, sounds like a ton of foundation, but you don't really get a lot off of each swipe from the doe foot applicator. Hopefully that all makes sense. So far the foundation looks really nice, and as of right now I do like it, so stay tuned. I will update you on that foundation the more I use it. Right now the first impressions is great. So let's go into some concealer. I'm going to use one from L'Oreal. This has been sitting on my vanity. I've been using it for the last several days this past week doing my makeup. I like the coverage, how everything looks. I really do enjoy everything about this concealer. I wear the shade Ivory, which is a little light, but it's quite brightening for me, which I do like. I'm going to do a couple little dots. I don't have a new concealer from the drugstore. It's a new launch, so I'm just going to use one of my favorites. Again, going back into that beauty sponge and blending this out. Concealer is blended and also set with the Maybelline Fit Me Loose Powder in the Fair Light. Let's do a little bit of bronzer. I'm going to go in with one of the new liquid Camo Bronzers from e.l.f. I have done a video just solely dedicated on the new bronzers, contours, and new additions to the blush line. That's part of the Camo line. It's the Camo liquid blushes. So they came out with a couple new shades. I'm going to go in with the shade Light in the bronzer. Do a couple little dots, go in with my e.l.f. Dual Complexion Brush, which is incredible, by the way. I feel like this brush is something I constantly recommend because it's so good. It blends everything out so beautifully. And it's just a couple bucks. If you're going to buy one of these, pick one of these up, add it to your order. It's such a good brush. I keep forgetting to order more backups. Every time I place an order at Ulta, I'm like, I need to add that, and I always forget. I have two. I need to get myself probably another one, like a third one would be good. But look how easy and seamless this bronzer blends out. And those two dots I feel like was too much. I kind of forgot how pigmented these were. You only really need a tiny bit. I do have the contour, which I don't really contour that often. So every now and again I'll play around with it, but it's not something I reach for as often. It's such a good formula. They knocked it out of the park. And that looks like it's blending out so nicely over the foundation. So yay. Do another dot here and here and blend. I am prepping my lids with the e.l.f. Lock It Down Primer. Let's talk about this eyeshadow palette for a moment. I've seen this palette quite a few times, honestly, on Instagram. I've had my eye on it. I thought about trying it. It's supposed to be what appears to be a dead-on dupe for a high-end eyeshadow palette. I have experienced the high-end, and we'll get into that in here in a minute because I have quite a bit to say about it. But it is one of the Makeup Revolution palettes. It's the True Icon palette. I will show you up close shots of this color story so you can see it a little bit more up close. I'm sure you've seen photos on social media. You may have seen this in videos. I did not watch any videos on this. I've just seen photos of it, swatches, comparing it, and saying it's a dupe for the Patrick Ta eyeshadow palette, which has a very similar look with those kind of rosy tones, those kind of pinky tones. This palette from Makeup Revolution is also including two creams, just like Patrick Ta, which are two creams on one side of the palette with a plastic window, just like the Patrick Ta. Of course, the packaging is so different from the high end, of course. It's much more of a kind of cheap plastic. It's very inexpensive. I think this palette was $10, maybe $12 at the most. So we can't knock it too much because the packaging is that typical cheap kind of drugstore type. The colors look so beautiful and pretty. I have not swatched it. I have not played around with it. I wanted to kind of capture this and share my thoughts with you on camera. I've seen this so many times I thought, you know what, I need to try it. As I mentioned before, I had experience with the Patrick Ta palette. I don't have that anymore. I actually returned it. The Patrick Ta palette looks very similar from memory, and the photos, looking at it, they look very similar with the color story and the arrangement of the metallic kind of sparkly shades at the top and the mattes and the creams here on the side. The Patrick Ta palette had a very dark kind of purple shade at the bottom, which I think this one is more kind of like a brown versus that dark kind of purple shade. I returned to my Patrick Ta palette because my purple color was not purple, it was green. It had a green coating over the top and then some green specks kind of migrating into some of the other shades. I was able to swatch some of the other colors that didn't have that coating on it and it was pigmented, but I'm pretty sure that green stuff was mold, and so I returned it to Sephora. And I have not touched any Patrick Ta eyeshadows since then. I'm kind of skeptical and a little bit apprehensive. I have one of his blush duos and that's it. I also had a not so great experience with some of his lip glosses, the plumping ones. So I thought this is probably, for me personally, a safer way to try something very similar and also get something kind of in that same color story in a palette like this that is not the Patrick Ta. Now, that doesn't mean that every single palette from Patrick Ta is going to have mold on it. It was a thing. It's probably been fixed. I'm sure he's aware of it, and it's fine. Everybody proceed forward. I just don't feel like I'm quite ready to invest that much money in a palette that could potentially go bad pretty quickly. Mind you, when I had my palette, I was using it and I turned the camera on to film my thoughts for the first time. So it was a brand new palette. It wasn't like it was sitting old in my collection. It was brand spanking new right out of the box. So now that we've got that out of the way, I wanted to kind of circle back to this palette and mention that there is a shade on the back that has a warning. It's got an eyeball with an X through it, and it's shade number 3 that is not supposed to be used around the eyes. So that is your call there. But we are going to crack into this because this looks really beautiful, and I just hope and pray, fingers crossed, that this actually blends out nicely and looks really beautiful. I'm going to start with the lightest shade in this palette, which is the matte color at the bottom of the palette, and I'm going to use that with an eyeshadow brush to set this primer, the e.l.f. primer. And I'm using an e.l.f. eyeshadow brush. This is a wide tapered brush, just to go from inner corner to outer corner, making sure that everything is set so that my blending is a little bit easier for me as we proceed with some of the darker shades. I'm going to go into the shade right next to it, which is a bit deeper, more tan. Again, another matte, and I'm going to use a fluffy crease brush to apply that shade. And this is kind of like a rosy tan shade. It's several shades deeper than what I just applied to set my primer. But I like, whoa, okay. Do you see the pigment? Oh, okay. Okay, I see you. Wow, wowee. And that is blending out so easily. Okay, I'm getting more excited. The more I add and play around with these colors, the more excitement I get. Okay. I remember trying Makeup Revolution back in 2015. They had a website specifically for US customers, and you could order a few of their pieces. Very affordable. I remember really liking a lot of their stuff. For as cheap as it was, they're still affordable. Of course, their prices have gone up since then, but they're not astronomical compared to high-end, of course. And they have some very affordable products compared to other drugstore brands. I do remember really liking their formulas. And this just seems a very amped up, kind of way more updated, elevated formula so far than what I remember them having for eyeshadows. So, wow. That color was easy to blend, easy to apply, and you immediately saw it going on from brush to eyelids. I'm switching to a Sigma E57 eyeshadow brush, and I'm going to go again right next door to that shade, which is a little bit deeper and a little bit more warm. So this is what I started off with in the crease here, and I'm going right next door. So this one's just a little bit deeper, and you do see more of those kind of rosy vibes, more apparent than here. So that's why I was so shocked that this shade looked like this on the eyes, because it doesn't look as rosy. But that other shade definitely has much more warmth, much more pigmentation to it. Those swatches, let me just, and they feel so soft and buttery. This is very different than what I remember them having. This is like very impressive. Okay, way to go. And I'm going to tap this on the outer part of my eyelids. So here on the outer V, I'm just going to pat and get that color placed where I want it. And then I'm going to come back and blend it with a smaller crease brush. Then with a thinner, more wispy style crease brush, I'm going to start blending that shade right into that transition rosy color that I had applied earlier, just to soften that edge and kind of merge those two shades together. I'm not really concerned with how it looks very unblended on my lid because we're going to cover that anyways. Now let's do the lower lashes. I'm going to switch to one of my go-to brushes, the BK Beauty 204. And I'm going to start with that same shade that I just applied to the outer V, so that kind of warm rosy shade right here at the bottom. And I'm going to run that from outer corner to about halfway. I'm going to stop right there and leave the inner part bare so I can add a little bit of a highlight there. And I'm making sure that it comes out a little bit so that it kind of connects to this outer V area. And then I'm going to go back into that crease brush that I used initially to apply the transition, and I'm going to blend that out just a little bit right on this outer edge so that this line right here is not as harsh looking. Then I'm going to go back into that light shade that I used for my transition with a wispy brush, that same one that I used for the outer V. I'm going to take just a pinch of that color, tapping off the excess, and I'm going to run that right underneath the lower lashes to create kind of like an ombre and a fade, and also pull it down just a little bit, just because that's my personal preference to have it a little bit thicker and smokier on the lower lashes. I want to play around with some of the deeper shades, so what I'm going to do is go back to that 204 smudge brush for the lower lashes and pick up the darkest shade that's right next to the dark cream product. So this one here is a very nice kind of warm brown shade. It's a very dark shade. I'm pretty sure it's going to be very pigmented. So I'm going to take a little bit of that and tap off the excess on my paper towel, give my brush a tap, and I'm going to apply that really close to the root of my lashes. And I'm just going to rock that brush back and forth. That little wispy brush is my best friend when it comes to blending, because I can get right underneath and blend that out and blend with each step of application that I use. This is the Angie Hot and Flashy BK Beauty brush, the A502. This is an amazing brush. These brushes, BK Beauty in general, is great. I know it's not drugstore, but it is so worth it. I'm going to go back into that eyeshadow brush that I used to set my primer, and I'm going to use the tip of it since it has a bit of a point to it. Hopefully you can see there. I'm going to use that point with that light shade that had that kind of peachy tone to it. And I'm going to take a pinch of that, tapping off the excess, and I'm going to go right underneath my brow bone. I'm also going to use a little bit of that shade very lightly, kind of like an eraser to clean up if I brought my eyeshadow down a little too low. I do this often with shades that match my skin tone and shades that are matte, by the way. I don't do this with a shimmer. I'm going to go back into that Sigma E57 brush with the darkest brown, so the shade that's right next to the cream. So this one here that we use to deepen the outer part of the lower lashes. I'm going to take that same shade and I'm going to pat that in the outermost corner of my eye, so that outer V. And I'm just going to pat. We're going to blend this out in a minute. I know that kind of looks very unblended, but trust me, we're not going to see that once we use some shimmer on the lids. Now we get to do something on the lids to cover up that line of that eyeshadow and add, of course, sparkle, because I'm here for it. I've been loving the sparkly, glittery look, and there's so many options in this palette, and I just cannot wait. One thing to note, as I look closely as I'm blending and adding color, there's virtually no fallout under my eyes, which is, I'm very much impressed. If you haven't gathered that just yet, I am very, very impressed with the quality of this so far. So let's talk about some of these shades. They look beautiful. They look so sparkly. I want to stop. Stop right there. That's that first shade. Ooh, this is so soft. Okay. That one has like a little bit of a shift to it. It's kind of like a pinky, kind of warmy peach type of shade. Well, it kind of looks similar to, that's these two here. So this one looks a little bit deeper than that second shade. So that's that one there. Okay, stop it right now. And that kind of orangey shade. Excuse me? Are you seeing that? Let's do that kind of purpley shade on my thumb. That's kind of like a metallic. Oh my gosh. You know what I want to do? I just want to swipe all this all over my face. That's how excited I get whenever I swatch eyeshadows and see that finish and that intensity. Oh, okay. They're not playing around. They're not playing around with this palette. Now, what color am I going to use today? That's the tough choice. I've decided I'm going to go in with this very light kind of pinky peach shade. This one here, when you swatch them, the shade right next to it does look very similar, but when you swatch it on your hand, you can see that there's a bit of a different tone to it. So initially at first I looked at it and I'm like, well, that's kind of similar, but they're really not when you swatch them. So I'm going to take that light shade, so the lightest of the two, so that kind of pinky peachy color. Use my finger and I'm going to press that. Oh my gosh, this is so pretty. I'm like so distracted by how beautiful this looks and I can't even talk right now. I'm just gonna press this gently onto my lids. I love it. I don't think my camera can handle how beautiful this looks. In person, this is going to look, you have to trust me on this. If you love these kind of sparkly, foiled, they're really soft, creamy to the touch shades and good, soft, buttery, easy to blend mattes, and you like this color story, just trust me on it. It's so pretty in person. And again, the same thing I experience with the mattes. There's virtually no fallout when I use my finger to apply that eyeshadow. So I hope that the other shades do the same thing. But it's something to know. I don't see hardly anything. Maybe a tiny little speck here and there on my lashes. But that is understandable because my finger is going to brush up against the lashes. But there is no sparkle or fallout whatsoever under my eyes or on my cheeks. So I love that. What I want to do is try the darkest cream in the palette as an eyeliner and then maybe set it with the dark matte eyeshadow. So if you flip over this little window, which is genius, thank you Makeup Revolution for doing that, because that is going to keep any fallout and dust from these eyeshadows from getting into the creams. That's one of the things that I loved about the Patrick Ta, and his components are like that when he has creams and powders. That plastic little flap does prevent any sort of buildup. Now this is like a sticky, which that's my only thing. It's kind of like a sticker put onto it. I would have preferred them to do a mechanism where that stays attached permanently. So you just open the window or like lift the flap and have it to be more of a like thicker plastic instead of like a flimsy, just, you know, the plastics that they put over eyeshadows and then you kind of throw that piece away. That's what this is. So I feel like they could have done something a little bit better, but honestly, it's really hard for me to nitpick because the formula is so good that I'm willing to forgive. I forgive you. I forgive you, Makeup Revolution. It's okay. It's a very dark brown. It looks really dark on camera, but in person, I do see that hint of like a reddish warmth undertone to it. I'm gonna take a little bit of that and do a thin line really close to the root of my lash. I don't wanna do it too thick because I don't really wanna cover this up. This is just too beautiful to cover up with thick eyeliner. So I want to try the creams out, and I thought this is the best way. I think the next time I use this palette, I'm gonna use the cream as a base for the eyeshadow. I'm now going to set that cream with some of the powder, and I'm going to go right next to it and use that shade, that dark kind of warm brown shade. It's very similar in tone, even though this looks a little bit more red. This is kind of close. So I'm going to use a really tiny detail brush, kind of stamp on top of that cream a bit of powder to set it so it doesn't move. I don't know if it's going to stay all day. Well, that remains to be seen. Before I apply mascara, one thing I noticed as I'm trying to set this cream, it does have quite a bit of emolliency to it, and it does move around quite a bit. So my line ended up looking a little bit thicker as I was trying to kind of stamp on that powder. So just something to note, that if you're going to do that sort of layering technique, just know that that cream is very creamy, very emollient, kind of almost glossy looking. So I don't think I would use those again as liner. I think I would use them maybe as a base to the eyeshadow. So I had this idea to try a brown mascara, and I ordered recently a new mascara. This is not new, it's just new to me. It's the L'Oreal Lash Paradise mascara, but in the Latte brown. This packaging is so beautiful. Look at that. So pretty, the brown shade on the outside and the cap. This mascara, the original, the Lash Paradise in the light pink tube, is fantastic. I remember going through about 6 tubes of that when that first launched many, many years ago. That was like my go-to mascara. Honestly, L'Oreal just knocks it out of the park. I feel like they are solid when it comes to their formulas, the performance, the pigmentation. They just do it right. And I'm hoping that this is going to be a nice pairing with these eyeshadow colors. Look how pretty that color is. So nice. Let's go ahead and do 2 coats on the top and 1 coat on the bottom. This latte brown is absolutely beautiful. It's the right shade of brown, and I've mentioned this before. When you use brown mascaras, the tone of brown matters. This is beautiful. It gives the definition to the lashes. It fans them out because the formula itself is really great at giving you length, volume, and thickness. But the tone of the latte brown is just a little bit softer on the eye, and I think it's kind of fun to play around with different colors, especially since I'm so used to using black mascaras always. That's my go-to. The darker the mascara, the better for that drama and that impact on the lashes, but it's nice to play around with a good brown mascara that's done right, and this is beautiful. I can see this being a beautiful shade for someone with lighter color eyes. I feel like that's just going to bring out those green, hazel, blue eyes. That would be incredibly beautiful. And while my mascara continues to dry, I'm going to go into one of those new liquid camo blushes from e.l.f. in the shade Copper Etiquette. I'm going to do tiny, tiny little dots because these are very pigmented, beautiful, but very pigmented. That's all you really need. Back into that e.l.f. Duo brush. I'm telling you, this brush is everything. You need it. Moving on to lips really quickly, I'm going to pull one of my Maybelline lifter liners. I bought the first few shades on Amazon when these first launched a couple months ago. These are fairly new for the brand and they are absolutely incredible. If you have not tried the lifter liners yet, what are you waiting for? They're incredible. They feel luxurious, high-end, and I want to say they're $9. This is your sign to go try them. I'm going to pull the shade out of line because this is the warmest out of the ones that I own and I feel like it would be perfect pairing for this eye combo. I'm also going to fill in the outer corners. I'm going to top it now with one of my favorite lip oil formulas. It's from e.l.f. These are from their new holiday set. It comes with a bunch of different colors for the holidays, including a new sparkly shade that's just exclusive to the set. I will link it down below for you. It's an incredible formula. I love these, and the shade I'm going to use is Rose Envy. Yeah. This is where it's at. This is such a good formula. I love them so much. That lip combo is beautiful. It's nice and warm. It's kind of like a warm, toasty rose shade. I love it, and I think it goes really well with this eye look. Final thing to do is some setting spray. The new NYX setting spray, the face glue. I did a video on this and the primer that actually does look and feel like school glue. Yes, it does. Try it out if you haven't. I will link the video down below for you so you can check out the review. I'm going to give this a good shake and set my face. Fan it as I always do to get it to dry. And this is the final look. There you have it. That is the full face of new makeup products from the drugstore. I'm going to just go ahead and say it. The drugstore is killing it. Their product launches are so great. I'm so incredibly impressed with this eyeshadow palette, okay? If you have not tried this, buy it now. Thank me later. It is beautiful. If you love these colors, these tones, if you want a palette that gives you those metallic shimmers with a little bit of that pretty like microfine sparkle, good quality mattes. They're throwing in a bonus of those 2 creams on the side. You definitely want to check this out. If you were thinking about the Patrick Ta palette but didn't want to spend the money, whether it's in your budget or not, I don't think you need it. I really don't. I don't think you need it. This is every bit as good, if not better. For me personally, this was better. And of course, I'm going to list and link everything down below. I will kind of keep an eye on my makeup today, the primer with that new Performer foundation, seeing how it plays well with the setting spray. I'm going to just kind of, like I said, keep an eye on it. I will let you know in the description box with wear notes how this turned out today. But as of right now, in this moment, everything is looking so incredibly good. And I am very thrilled and happy with the turnout today, how it looks. Everything just looks so pretty, and the sparkle, I just cannot stop looking at my eyes. It is incredibly beautiful. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thanks for being here, for watching and spending some of your day with me today. You can also subscribe for more videos like this in the future. I post every Tuesday and every Friday. I also do post periodically on Instagram. My username pops up here on the screen. I hope to connect with you there. Take care, you guys, and we'll talk very soon. Bye-bye.